Welcome, friends. Today we are visiting at Mount Gerizim in the Shomron. Mount Gerizim is located south of Shechem and the Roman city of Neapolis, known by the Arabs as Nablus. It rises to the elevation of 886 meters above sea level, making it one of the highest points between the west and the east. Meaning, if you're coming up from Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv is on the seashore, so you would be driving to the east, ascending up the mountain ridge. You would drive on Road 5 all the way to Ariel, and then continue on the same road. It becomes 505 until the Tapuach Junction, and then you would turn north. You would turn north on Road 60 and drive straight through an Arab village called Harbraha, and you would reach a circle where in the front, ahead of you, is a big red sign that says it's forbidden for Israelis to enter. The sign is big, it's red, and it's written in English, in Arabic, and in Hebrew. You need to turn to the left or to the right if you are Israeli or if you are Jewish. And if you go straight through, you will be entering Area A of the Palestinian Authority, which is forbidden for Israelis. In any case, at that circle, we would turn to the left and continue up the mountain to Mount Gerizim. Here we're already ascending on Mount Gerizim, and when we reach the higher area, we'll pass by an Israeli town called Harbraha to our left, and we will continue to the Samaritans. We'll drive through the Samaritan neighborhood and up to the peak of the mountain, which is where the archaeological site is. And we'll speak more about the archaeological site. But again, when we reach the peak of the mountain, we are at 886 meters above sea level. Two important roads lead to the mountain in ancient times, or led to the mountain in ancient times. One from the north, from the vicinity of Shechem. Shechem, again, is Nablus in biblical terms, and in Hebrew for Israelis and for Jewish people and Bible believers. This city is considered Shechem, and in Shechem, which is in the valley below Mount Gerizim, there is an archaeological site called Tel Balata, which is the ancient biblical site of the city of Shechem that is mentioned in the Bible, where our father Jacob purchased a plot of land. And later in the Bible, in the book of Joshua, Joseph, the son of Jacob, was buried in Shechem. And in the Shechem, near Balata, there is the burial place, the Joseph's tomb. We'll speak about that more later on, and dedicated videos when we're speaking about Shechem and Joseph's tomb. Mount Gerizim covers about 400 dunam, which is about 100 acres, and contains the remains of a Hellenist city, a Greek city, and a Byzantine Church, and its enclosure. The Byzantine Church, we'll speak more about that too. The Byzantines came about in the middle of the 4th century. They were the continuation of the Roman Empire when the Roman Empire adopted the Christianity and became a Christian empire. And they fought against the Jews in Judaea, and later a very brutal war against the Samaritans. When they finally succeeded in oppressing the Samaritans, they built a church on top of the Samaritan holy place, which is Mount Gerizim. This site that we are visiting, Mount Gerizim, is the Samaritan alternative to Jerusalem and the Temple Mount in the Jewish tradition. And that's what really makes this site so interesting. The archaeological excavations. The archaeological excavations at the site began in 1982 directed by Yitzhak Magen, and the archaeological staff of Judaea and Samaria Central Command. This area is in Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, and has been controlled by Israel through the IDF and the Ministry of Defense since Israel's Six-Day War in 1967. And that is the main, you could say, the main platform of government in Judea and Samaria. Under that, there are the regional councils for the Israeli communities and the Palestinian Authority for the Arab communities. In any case, the archaeological staff for the Judea and Samaria Central Command conducted archaeological research at the site for 20 years, between 1982 and the year 2000. The site was open to the public as under the responsibility and management of the Israel National Park Society in 2012, about 10 years ago. The name Mount Gerizim is found in the Torah from the beginning of the Israelite experience in the land of Canaan. In the Torah, the children of Israel are commanded to conduct the ceremony of the blessing and the cursing at Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Mount Ebal is just to the north of us, and the city of Shechem is in between Mount Ebal to the north and Mount Gerizim to the south. We're standing on Mount Gerizim now. The Torah says, when the Lord your God has brought you into the land that you are entering to occupy, you shall set the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. That is Deuteronomy 11, chapter 11, verse 29. And later the words of blessing and the curse and the division of the tribes are presented. The division meaning that 6 tribes stood on this mountain and 6 tribes stood on that mountain, on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, but they were all together as a community, as the Kohanim, the priest, stood in the middle between these 2 mountains and recited the blessings and the curses that are found in the Torah. This is fulfilled by Joshua immediately after the conquest of the land. And we read this in Joshua, the book of Joshua in the Bible, chapter 8, verses 30 and 31. Mount Gerizim is again mentioned in the parable of Yotam, of whom it is said, when he stood at the top of Mount Gerizim, in the book of Judges, chapter 9, verse 7. Mount Gerizim is not mentioned again in the Old Testament, neither during the monarch period, or in connection with the conflict between Sanballat the Haronite, and Nehemiah during the period of the return of the Babylon exile. During the Second Temple period, there are once more written sources referring to Mount Gerizim. Josephus Flavius, Yosef ben Matityahu in Hebrew, states, he the great historian, he states that Sanballat the Haronite erected a temple modeled after that in Jerusalem on Mount Gerizim, and appointed his son-in-law, Manasseh, of Jewish origin, a brother of Judaea, the high priest in Jerusalem, as the high priest around the time of Alexander the Great's conquest, the second half of the 4th century. This we find in Josephus Flavius in Antiquities. Many scholars dispute the statement by Josephus because of the similarity between this story and the one presented in the book of Nehemiah. So there are researchers who believe that Josephus copied this text from Nehemiah and adapted it to the story he wished to tell. And the problem with the researchers are that we don't find the evidence, the archaeological evidence that support the building of the Samaritan Temple at the time that Josephus claims. One of the sons of Jehoiada, the high priest Eliashib, the son of Sanballat the Haronite, has chased him away from me. That's what it says in Nehemiah 13:28. Let's go over the timeline of this site and the land of Israel in general, but specifically for what we're seeing here. By the way, now we are looking to the west. we can see the opening in the mountains ahead of us, and below that is the seashore. To the left of us is the Israeli town of Harbraha, which is also on the top of Mount Gerizim. On Mount Gerizim we have Harbraha, which is an Israeli town, or to some a settlement, the Samaritan town of Kiryat Luz, which is just below us to the right, and we'll see more of that as we walk around, and the park, the archaeological park, that is run by the Israel Park Association. Here we can see the Samaritan Town. The Samaritans, by the way, are a remarkable phenomenon of a tiny Israelite community who are not Jewish. According to their traditions and their beliefs, they are descendants of the northern tribes of Israel, specifically Manasseh and Ephraim, and the Levites, the Kohanim, dating back to the time that the nation of Israel was divided into two kingdoms, the southern kingdom of Judaea and the northern kingdom of Israel. So according to the Samaritan narrative, they are descendants of the northern tribes. And again, according to their narrative, Mount Gerizim was always the blessed mountain. As the Torah says, the blessing never left the mount. The blessing never left the mount. And they believe that the Jewish tradition changed and moved the holiness from Mount Gerizim to Jerusalem, and that they preserved their tradition, this Shomronim. Shomer means the keepers. They believe that they are the keepers of the true faith of Israel. This is, of course, very, very interesting to realize that there's a real alternative reality to what we might be accustomed to, the Jewish narrative. There's also the Samaritan narrative. And there's a dispute regarding the narrative itself. The origin of the Samaritans, the Jewish belief is, or the customary Jewish tradition regarding the Samaritans are that they are descendants of migrants who were brought in by the Assyrians after they conquered the northern kingdom of Israel and exiled the Israelites. We've now entered the Byzantine Church, the remains of the Byzantine Church, which is the Roman Empire, became Christian, and in the year 324, they conquered the Samaritan area and the holy mountain to the Samaritans, Mount Gerizim, after a number of Samaritan revolts against the Byzantines. And the Byzantines decided to build a huge church. It's an octagon. It has eight sides of this church. It was a magnificent church, and it's built at the Samaritan holy place. And this took place in the year 324 in the Common Era. So this entire plateau that we're walking around are the remains of the church and its courtyard. The building with the small dome is something else from the Mamluk period, which is the 13th century. Was built later on. So going back over the timeline of the land of Israel and Mount Gerizim, 1812 before the Common Era is the time of Abraham and Jacob, who are mentioned coming to Shechem. Shechem is the city just below us. In the behind Mount Gerizim, we can see the tip of Mount Ebal, which is just behind us, and Shechem is in the middle. We will see that in a moment when we walk up to the platform here, and we can look down and see the city of Shechem. In the 13th century before the Common Era to the 11th century before the Common Era is the period of the judges that we read about in the Bible. The Itnachalut, the entry to the land of Israel. Here we can see the city of Shechem, and we can see Joseph's tomb from here, but we really need to stand here for me to point it out to you. And here we're looking to the east. We're seeing the mountain ridge of Itamar, and behind us, behind the mountain ridge, is the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. In the year 722, before the Common Era, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, and they exiled the children of Israel, the Israelites, from the northern kingdom. And according to the research, the Samaritan Temple was built on Mount Gerizim originally during the Persian period, when the Persians controlled the land of Israel, which is the second temple time when the Judeans built the second temple in Jerusalem. The Samaritans built their temple here on Mount Gerizim, which is actually here. This site, the Byzantine Church, is built on top of the Samaritan Temple, according to the archaeologists. Again, there's a whole dispute of narratives on many issues regarding the Samaritans and their history. Currently, the current Samaritan narrative denies that they had built a temple at all. They have other explanations for the archaeological evidence that is here, specifically the western wall of the Samaritan Temple, which is outside of this compound. We passed by when we enter the compound, and we will pass by again when we exit. The archaeologists see this line of huge stones, of huge building stones. Archaeologists and research scholars identify this line of stones as the western wall of the Samaritan Temple. But according to the Samaritan narrative, they never constructed a temple. They only had the Mishkan, which is the tent. By the way, there is a replica of the tent of the children of Israel, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, at the Bible Park at the Ariel Hotel, Eshel HaShomron. So if you would like to see what the tabernacle, the Mishkan, looked like when the children of Israel wandered in the desert for 40 years, we can visit the hotel at Ariel and their biblical park and see this very amazing replica, model, life-size model of the tabernacle. Here to our left, below us, we can see the 12 stones. There are 12 large stones that the archaeologists believe are the western wall of the Samaritan Temple. And this site, the site that we're walking through, which is an archaeological park today and open to visitors, is still the holy place for the Samaritans who live in the neighborhood below and in Chulon. The entire Samaritan nation are less than 1,000 people, and about half of them live here in the neighborhood in Kiryat Luz or Kiryat Luza on Mount Gerizim, on their holy mountain, and half of them live in Israel in Chulon, which is a neighborhood south of Tel Aviv. By the way, the Samaritans, who observe an Israelite religion which is parallel to the Jewish religion and observe the holidays that we are familiar with in the Jewish traditions, but observe them a little differently. Their calendar is almost identical to the Jewish calendar, but they leap year in a different structure than the Jewish leap year. And that explains why this year there is a month between the Jewish holidays and the Samaritan holidays. So today we are celebrating Sukkot, and for that reason we see many families touring around. This is a popular site for Israeli tourism in the Shomron. People come from all over the country to visit the Mount Gerizim, to see the movie at the visitor center that tells the history of the site and of the Samaritans, and to visit the archaeological park. And there are other activities and recreations for families here on Mount Gerizim. The Samaritan Sukkot will be in 1 month from now, and I will hold some special tours because their Sukkot is very special. I hope that you enjoyed this tour, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. So be well, and hope to see you here in Israel.